So let's just to recap here. Just over the past few hours, Trump has been musing about violence against the press, saying that he shouldn't have left office, and mixing up what state he is speaking in, which is all quite the closing message. So I've said it before, and I will keep saying it. Nobody knows how this thing is going to turn out. But I think it is safe to say that one campaign does seem to be closing this thing out very strong, and one seems to be losing oxygen fast.
All right, guys, so it's the day before the election, and I am ready to make some solid predictions about what I think is going to happen, who I think is going to win. But before we get into that, I have to basically explain why I am making the prediction that I'm going to make, because the mainstream liberal media and the hoaxes that they put out over the last week or so would make the average person believe that things are not going well for Trump. Okay. However, the data does not match the reality that Democrats are trying to manufacture. Okay. And that's what I want people to understand going into election day, that you're going to see a whole lot of hopium on the mainstream liberal media outlets pretending as if Kamala Harris is doing better than she actually is, and that so many voters are turned off by Trump and his comments and a joke that was told by a comedian at his Madison Square Garden rally, because they want to manufacture a reality that right now, according to the data, does not exist, which is that Kamala Harris has such strong momentum going into this election because she has Obama level enthusiasm, right? Voters are so enthusiastic about voting for Kamala Harris, when again, that's just simply not the case. Okay. The first hoax I want to talk about here from the liberal media is this idea that Trump has lost a significant amount of the Puerto Rican vote, specifically in the state of Pennsylvania, due to a joke from a comedian that was made at the Madison Square Garden rally. Again, if you listen to the mainstream liberal media and them out here interviewing random Puerto Ricans who were probably going to vote for Kamala anyways, again, you would think that Trump essentially has lost all of the Puerto Rican vote. Take a look.
Station. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Martinez. Just give me the download on the reaction, because people don't realize, like, Allentown is to Puerto Ricans as Miami is to Cubans. It's a very, very heavily Puerto Rican town. What's been the reaction to this joke?
For the last 3 days, we've been taking nonstop calls and comments from people upset, pissed off to the fact that, number one, this was said, and number two, with every hour that goes by, people are getting more and more upset because they just can't stand or understand why Trump hasn't said anything about it, why he hasn't distanced himself, why he hasn't denied it or apologized. This could have been fixed real quick. He could have said, listen, I'm sorry, I don't know this guy, I don't appreciate what he said, I don't agree what he said, and done. Now 3-4 days almost later, silence, nothing.
Are you Puerto Rican?
Yes, I am.
You are. Did anything that happened at Madison Square Garden last week?
Yes. Yes, it did affect. Yes, it did affect my decision a lot.
Do you think it's going to make a difference in the election?
Yes, it's going to make a difference.
Do you think that the Puerto Rican community could
Yes, absolutely
decide who's going to be president?
Yes. As a female, we were already leaning more towards Kamala when it has to do with women's rights. So now you just pushed us even more. Now you pushed the Puerto Rican women even more.
You said you were leaning towards him to vote, and now you're like, Wow.
I didn't want to say so, but no, he doesn't have my vote.
A little bit more, and went to an AOC rally yesterday. And I want to tell you, you were right. First of all, every Puerto Rican in Pennsylvania has heard about the garbage comment. They all know about it. Two, they're all pissed about it. I mean, again, you were right. I mean, there's this real pride thing in Puerto Rico, and there's like nothing more that Trump could have done to offend Puerto Ricans than to describe their country as garbage.
Yeah, so again, you know, if you're listening to the mainstream liberal media and watching Don Lemon videos, which again is probably not a lot of people, okay, again, they try to manufacture this fake outrage over this joke, when the reality is that they were interviewing people who already were going to vote for Kamala Harris, right? They pretended as if they was open to voting for Trump, because everybody knows that Puerto Ricans who are actually voting for Trump are not going to be offended by a joke, right? Everybody knows that. In fact, I think it's actually more offensive to assume that Puerto Ricans are going to change their vote over a joke, right? I think that's actually the most offensive thing about this, okay? So lo and behold, we have a new poll from Univision that came out showing that Trump not only hasn't lost any support, but he's actually gained support among Puerto Ricans, specifically in Pennsylvania from 2020. Okay, he has gained 3 points and Kamala has lost 3 points, right? So you're talking about a 6-point swing from 2020. Now, again, that may not seem like a lot, right? But you got to understand, a lot of those Puerto Ricans were already Democrats, right? Largely Democrats, okay? Which is why, again, most of the Puerto Ricans that were being interviewed were Democrats that were offended by this. Of course, Democrats are going to be offended by it. They're Democrats, okay? They're liberals. But when you talk about affecting the outcome of an election, right? You should be seeing a significant swing in which Trump is actually losing support, which, again, there's no data whatsoever to suggest that is the case. In fact, again, Trump has gained support. So, again, it seems as if this joke offended Puerto Ricans, it didn't offend them enough to drop his numbers in support below that of where Puerto Ricans were supporting him in 2020. Furthermore, they tried to extend this to make it offensive towards the whole Latino community, not just the Puerto Rican community. And it turns out that hasn't really affected him with the Latino community as a whole either, which is what they admitted on MSNBC.
Trump has faced widespread backlash for his comments about Puerto Rico, but he's continued to gain support among Hispanic voters. An Economist YouGov poll that ended after the Madison Square Garden rally shows Vice President Harris leading Trump by 12 points among Latinos, less than half the advantage she had in September.
Yeah, so much for all those pissed off Latinos and Puerto Ricans that are supposed to be hate voting against Trump. Again, we're just not seeing that in the data. But another thing I want to address, again, is this idea that is going to be pushed in the mainstream liberal media, that, again, there's such a strong enthusiasm for Kamala Harris on the ground, and there's so many people that can't wait to line up and vote for her so that she can become the first woman to be president of the United States. Again, they are trying to manufacture a reality that there is Obama-level enthusiasm for Kamala Harris, which is something that we've heard throughout her whole campaign.
And joining us now, the chair of the Democratic Party from Wisconsin, Ben Wickler. Okay, Ben, tell us what you're seeing and hearing on the ground. What's going to be the difference there?
I'm joining you from Ozaukee County. It's a northern suburb county of Milwaukee. This is one of the places with the biggest swing over the last few cycles. Jody Haber-Sinekin on track to flip a state Senate district in the most expensive state Senate race in Wisconsin history. And here in Ozaukee County and all over Wisconsin, and I've been in every corner of this state in the last few days, there is explosive, propulsive energy on the ground. People knocking on every door in a community that we're targeting for turnout and then going back for a second pass already. And what we're seeing that translate to is an explosion in early votes cast in person, in same-day registrations, and in vote-by-mail ballots being returned. So in the final stretch, we have this enormous army of volunteers ready to go. We're calling millions of phones. We've knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors, and we can translate all of that into a focus just on the people that haven't voted yet and push our turnout even higher. Democrats are feeling good in Wisconsin in the final stretch.
Yeah, so this is the type of hopium that you're going to get hit with for the next 48 hours, right, as the election takes place. And basically what they're doing is that they are trying to motivate Democrats to get out and vote, because Democrats have a huge turnout problem going into election day, right? The reality is that Democrats are just not showing up to vote, right? At least not compared to 2020, okay? And that is a big problem for Democrats, because not only are they not showing up to vote, but also Republicans are showing up into early voting. And again, they tell you that we should not draw any conclusions from early voting. However, would they really be saying that if the Democrats were outperforming their 2020 numbers this year? Would they really be saying we shouldn't draw any conclusions from it? I don't think so, right? But the Trump campaign has released this bombshell memo, essentially highlighting this huge problem of Democrat turnout, when, again, Kamala Harris is supposed to be this game-changing candidate that has Obama-level enthusiasm. Except, again, when it comes to people actually voting, we're not seeing that, okay? So let's actually look here. In Arizona, urban turnout is down 385,000 votes compared to this point in 2020. Female turnout is down 170,000 compared to 2020. Rural turnout is up. Now, here's the thing, right? We've been told time and time again that, oh, the gender gap is a problem. Except the GOP is actually performing better in the early vote when it comes to the so-called gender gap, in the sense that the gap is not as large for female turnout as it was in 2020, right? Which definitely bodes well for the GOP. And you're seeing the same pattern in essentially every single swing state, which is being outlined here by the Trump campaign. Okay, rural turnout is up, urban turnout is down, female turnout is down, right? That is essentially what is happening, which again would make logical sense because Kamala Harris was installed as the Democrat Party candidate. Like, nobody voted for her, and she did not have the ability to excite the Democrat Party base in 2019. Why would anybody think that she has the ability to do so in 2024? Also, on top of that, there's not nearly as much Trump derangement this time around in this election because Trump is not in office, right? So what Democrats campaigned on in 2020, which motivated a lot of people, the primary motivator was not Biden, it was Trump. Because at the time of the pandemic, everybody was essentially blaming Trump for every COVID death and the current state of the country, even though it wasn't Trump's fault. And I think that's what actually motivated people to vote. Now, fast forward 4 years, people realized, that orange guy, his economy wasn't that bad, right? Things were not that bad under Trump. In fact, things were actually pretty good. And the Trump derangement is just not a motivating factor anymore. Well, it's not as much as a motivating factor as it was in 2020. And Kamala Harris, again, there's nothing exciting about her. It doesn't matter what the media says. You can't put lipstick on a pig, okay? It's still a pig. So again, what you're seeing here is that across a ton of swing states, like, for example, Arizona, the early vote, the GOP is up, okay, compared to 2020, in which the Democrats actually had a better advantage over the GOP, right? So again, what you would have to believe in order to think that Kamala Harris was actually doing well, which is that a significant amount of these votes either are the GOP essentially using up their votes, or a significant amount of these GOP votes are actually Kamala votes. That's what you would have to believe, okay? And I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying that's what you have to believe. But again, to be up 100, almost 200,000 votes, early votes, compared to Democrats being up 20,000 votes in 2020, in which Democrats barely won Arizona in 2020. And I say that with an asterisk, of course. Again, this is not good for Democrats because historically speaking, Republicans vote more on election day. Now, again, the copium here from Democrats is that, well, all these independent votes, right? Oh, well, they're breaking for Kamala Harris, right? They're going to break for Kamala Harris. These independent women are going to break for Kamala Harris. Okay, but again, you're seeing the same pattern over and over and over again. Like, for example, in Pennsylvania, you see that in 2020, they had a firewall of 1.1 million votes, which means they had 1.1 million votes more than the Republicans going into election day. Now, this year, they only have 409,000 more votes, which means that on election day, Republicans have less votes to make up for, because again, most Republicans vote on election day. Okay. And again, these results are concerning, and Democrats are being asked about these results and whether or not they are a true concern for them. And, hey, they really don't have much to say about it. They can't come out here and tell you with a straight face that they feel good about what's currently happening with the early voting numbers. Take a look.
Okay, so you said that you're optimistic about Pennsylvania. Here's something that may cause you concern. Early voting, 2024, Democrats have put in 971,615, Republicans 571,725. Compared to 2020, you're down 42%. Republicans are down 8%. And here is what Jim Messina said on Sunday with Jen Psaki on MSNBC about the early vote. Listen here.
What's their biggest concern right now if you're the Harris team?
Well, look, I think it's a couple things. The early vote numbers are a little scary, and you and I have been texting back and forth. Republicans didn't do what they did last time. Last time Trump said don't early vote, and so they didn't. Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020, and that's scary.
So he says it's scary what he's seeing in the early vote. What do you say?
I say that I hope folks will get out there and vote if you haven't already. Exercise your right to be a part of our democracy. And to your viewers, remember, we won't have final results here in Pennsylvania
of course, but does it
for
concern
several
you?
days after November 5th. Does it concern you, Senator, the way it concerns Jim Messina?
Does it concern you, Senator, the way it concerns Jim Messina?
November 5th.
Does it concern you, Senator, the way it concerns Jim Messina?
Well, sure. I'm concerned about this election all over the country. It is going to be razor thin. We're going to be working on it until the last hour. Part of why I've been campaigning across Pennsylvania and encouraging people to come out and vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is because I think this is very close.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that the election isn't close, but I personally think that if the election was held today, Trump would have probably 65% chance of winning. I think realistically, that is where his odds are, okay? And I'm actually now ready to make predictions for you guys because I guess when you're in the game of politics, punditry, you got to make these predictions. Now, here's the thing. I am going to give a disclaimer, and I'm obviously going to hedge before giving these predictions. These predictions are based off what I think is the most likely scenario based off the data today. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris can't win. I'm not saying it's impossible because obviously, hey, there could be some shenanigans, but tossing aside the shenanigans, in order for Kamala Harris to win, Democrats are going to have to buck election day trends in the sense that, one, they're going to have to turn out in historic numbers on election day, and Republican men specifically are going to have to not show up to vote, which again is highly unlikely. Furthermore, they're going to have a lot of liberal women and a lot of pro-choice Republican women coming out in droves voting for Kamala Harris, okay? And again, this was part of the reason why that Iowa poll dropped, okay? That Iowa poll that the mainstream media is making a big deal about, showing Kamala up plus 3 or 4 or something like that. Something crazy to think about, right? But that poll, the reason why she was up was because of women, right? Because of the issue of democracy and abortion. I really do believe that poll was put out there as hopium for the Kamala Harris campaign because at this point, that is what they need the most. They need hopium, right? They need a large injection of, hey, we can win this, okay? That we have a chance at winning. Look at this Iowa poll that usually is very reliable, and we're going to put this out here and say that these women are fired up to vote for Kamala Harris because of democracy and abortion, right? Iowa is going to flip blue because of democracy and abortion. Again, this is the narrative that is being put out there in the media, right? This is the narrative. I wouldn't be surprised if Ann Seltzer was paid a large amount of money to put that poll out. She's been doing her laps on the mainstream liberal media, explaining her poll in ways that are incoherent and just don't really make sense, okay? I wouldn't be surprised because, listen, if it worked and Kamala ends up winning, Ann Seltzer will be praised as a hero amongst the liberal media, right? Because, again, she injected the hopium that they needed in order to help Kamala Harris get that turnout from women that she's going to need on election day in order to win, okay? That is, I think, what is currently happening, right? And if Trump wins, then they will honestly just forget about it and say, oh, well, hey, it was just one poll in which she was off, not a big deal. And also, again, she probably got paid heavily, right? I'm just saying, like, if Trump wins, I'm almost convinced, I'm almost certain that she was paid to put that out there as hopium. So let's get into my map here. And first, we're going to start off with the states that I am most confident in, right? The states that Trump basically is performing the strongest in, the Sun Belt. So Georgia, I think Trump is going to pick up Georgia and North Carolina. One of the main reasons is because in the early vote numbers, we're seeing that the black voter turnout is abysmal, right? It is terrible. Now, turnout overall is up, specifically in Georgia. But again, it's not among blacks. It's among basically Republicans and everybody else, right? And if black voters aren't showing up for Kamala Harris, then that is going to be a problem in Georgia. It's going to be a problem in North Carolina. And it's probably going to be a problem in Pennsylvania as well, too, because Pennsylvania has a large black population in Philadelphia, right? So I personally think that Trump is going to pick up North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona as well, too, because he's polling pretty well in Arizona. I think Arizona is actually the strongest place that Trump is polling in right now going into the election in regards to the swing states. So I feel pretty confident in those three. Now, Pennsylvania, I personally think is going to flip red, although Trump doesn't necessarily need Pennsylvania if he gets North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, which again are the states that he needs the most. If he picks up Pennsylvania, it's basically over, right? And I think that it's likely that he will be. And one of the reasons why is because I think that the union vote, the blue collar working class vote is going to break for Trump. And I think, honestly, that's going to put him over the top in Pennsylvania. Now, again, if he wins those 4 states, it doesn't really matter what happens in Wisconsin and Nevada and Michigan. But just for the sake of argument, I'm probably going to say that Wisconsin likely is going to go for Trump as well, too, which would put him at 291. Michigan, I will give Kamala Harris Michigan, although historically speaking, the blue wall moves as a whole. So if Pennsylvania goes red, Wisconsin goes red, it's likely that Michigan is going to go red. And I think that in Nevada, that's pretty much a toss-up. Doesn't really matter that much because it's only 6 votes. But I think possibly that is going to go for Trump. And I think this is the scenario that you're probably going to be looking at on Election Day. But easily, this could also be Michigan red as well, too. We could be looking at 312 votes. But I think that this year, that trend in which the blue wall kind of moves together, I think that's going to break. I actually think that possibly Kamala Harris could pick up Michigan. But that's just me being generous towards Kamala Harris at this point, because I think that's the swing state she's performing the best in. That's the one that she has the best chance of winning. But you know that Pennsylvania is a problem for Kamala because she's spending the last day of campaigning in Pennsylvania. I think she has like 4 events today in Pennsylvania, right? And she's going very hard on Pennsylvania because of what we went over in this video in regards to early voting turnout, right? Turnout is down, enthusiasm is down. So again, she's rallying in Pennsylvania because she basically has to win that state, right? If Pennsylvania goes red, again, it basically makes it very hard for Trump to lose, okay? Also, something else that I would watch out for is Virginia possibly flipping red, okay? And then look out for New Hampshire as well, too. Again, unlikely, but I think it's actually more likely that Virginia flips red or New Hampshire flips red than for the scenario that Democrats are hoping for, which is for Iowa to flip blue, which, I mean, at that point, I mean, you know, if this holds, right, they can have Iowa, but I don't think that's going to happen, okay? I don't think that Iowa is going to flip blue. I'm just saying that it's probably more likely that Trump is going to flip one of these blue states, Virginia, New Hampshire, than it is for Kamala Harris to flip Iowa. And this is where I'm at this point, okay? The day before the election, I got Trump winning 297 to Democrats losing 241. And I think that this is the most likely scenario. The only thing that I think can change this for Kamala Harris is, again, if women, liberal women, come out in droves, historically speaking, on Election Day and vote for Kamala Harris, and also pro-choice Republican women as well, too, the ones that have already voted or that are coming out on Election Day, coming out and voting for Kamala Harris in droves. That is the only scenario in which I see Kamala Harris winning. If Kamala Harris ultimately ends up winning, it's going to be because of that. That is going to be the sole reason. It's going to be abortion, and that's it, right? That is her only chance of winning. But historically speaking, Trump has underperformed in the polls going into the election. He has overperformed on the day of the election. And there's no reason in my mind to believe that that's not going to happen again. Even the New York Times came out and said, yeah, we have a hard time polling Trump supporters, so the polls are probably going to underestimate Trump support again. I'm just saying, if Kamala wins, it's going to be very strange because she would have to buck so many trends, okay? So many things will have to go right in her favor that, again, just historically speaking, doesn't really happen in order for her to win at this point. And I just don't see it happening. But then again, you just never know. This is not a perfect science, but the overall odds, I would say Trump, 65% chance of winning as of right now. Kamala Harris, 40% chance of winning. When it comes to the popular vote, I give Trump a slight advantage there as well, too. He may win it by a point or two, or maybe it might be effectively tied. Wouldn't be surprised if Kamala wins the popular vote and Trump wins the electoral college. That also could happen as well, too. But as of right now, I give Trump a slight edge in the popular vote along with winning the electoral college. We will see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.